When you hear the ornamental flow, you know there's only one thing to do. Like and retweet the pinned tweets. Immediately. All right. Welcome. Hello. It's Tuesday, January 20th. This is a Logo Circle online space that you can find right here every Tuesday. I pass it now to your esteemed host, Mr.
How are we doing today, friends? Let me know first how I'm coming through, if everything's crystal clear, squeaky clean, etc.
Very nice. Beautiful.
Thank you, my friend. Welcome, everyone, to the Logos Spaces. This is specifically the Tuesdays Logo Circle Spaces. We have a really nice conversation and some updates up and coming for you guys. I think you're really going to enjoy what we have to discuss. The first thing I'm going to start with, as per usual, are the disclaimers. So number one, guys, as per usual, any ideas, thoughts, philosophies, wild notions that we happen to share are the products of our own minds and are not affiliated with the Logos brand or identity. Number two, if we happen to bring up any kind of crypto projects or do any type of name dropping within the crypto space, that none of this is to be taken as financial advice. Please do your own due diligence. Don't YOLO or ape into any kind of random shit coins. And if you do, do it at your own peril and your own risk. Thank you very much. Number three is this is a community. The Logo Circle space specifically is dedicated to the community. We do our usual and provide updates. We have the circles, quote unquote, leads. And I put leads in air quotes because they're really stewards that help push this movement forward. They can come up and speak, and many of them will come up and speak as usual on Tuesday. But at any time, if you guys want to come up and engage in the conversation or ask questions, we 100% encourage that. And we want that. We want that kind of participation. We are here to build a community. That's one of the primary purposes of the Logos Network. It is a singular impetus that we're trying to push for, that we all want to be part of this community and grow this network. Right? Very cool. Okay. So with that said, I think we can go ahead and get started for the with the updates. We'll do the Logo Circles updates, leads updates, and then we'll go into a conversation. I think we're intending on having a conversation that Roxana when we start, I'll let her kick off. We're going to talk a bit about post-industrial society, kind of institutional collapse and decay, what that looks like, and based on an article by Samo, is it Buha? I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Anyway, we'll get to that. Let's start with the updates. I'm going to let you guys go ahead. We have Roxana up here. I'll let her provide her update, and we also have Chair up here, or will be up here, and he can provide his update. And then I think Amelia will be here. She's running maybe a bit behind, but she will be in the space as well. Cool. So let's go ahead. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Roxana, welcome to the stage, friend.
Hello. Just doing a mic check, the usual. Much needed for London. Great to see everyone. Happy Tuesday. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you're having a great start of the week. We've been very busy. We are planning for 2 really good events that are happening within the next week. One is a deepen meetup at the Ethereum Community Hub in London, organized by Eat London and our friend James Zaki, which will happen, I believe, this Friday. And the second one is the Logos London Circle, which will happen next Monday in the evening. It's on Luma. If you do go to our Logo Circles pinned, can I say pinned post there? You should be able to find a link to all the events and find London as well. Our focus will be understanding how do we reframe our winnable issue now that the government isn't pushing for mandatory digital ID, but digital ID is still in the cookbook of the government. And we'll try to explore a few other things. One of them is how do we, how do we find some really good meetup locations, like public meeting spaces um, for exchanging ideas. And this will be something that James from Eat London and I will bring up at the next Logo Circle as well. We'll try to brainstorm and figure out where we could have more frequent gatherings and meetups and roundtables for developers and for people that want to build applications on open source technologies, including logos. That is the update for the London Circle for January. For February, we have a few things lined up, including a very interesting event that I'll be able to talk more about as we confirm specific things. But it's a gathering of people that are interested in civic society. It's not organized by us; it's organized by someone else, but we got invited. And very exciting. It might just be February might just be the first circle that we will do in Asia, in APAC, which has been confirmed for February 13th in Bangkok, together with us from Logos and our friends at APAC DAO. So it's going to be the first, I think, the first APAC circle
relevant to the discussion, as that's important for continuing to add value to our community space here. So, Roxana, I'm going to let you kick it off, my friend, and we'll get it going.
Sounds good. Thank you, Sterling. Yeah, this is as you mentioned, this was an article inspired by a previous work dating a couple of years ago from the author who's the edit. So it's from Samuel Bourgeois, who's the editor in chief of Palladium magazine, and he's done a lot of work in terms of research and investigating the institutionalized landscape of sort of society, providing consultancy works as well. His article, the one I'm referring to, essentially talks about the Industrial Revolution stopping before it was even completed. And there's a few things that he mentioned, which I think are very interesting for us um, to cover during the discussion today. One is the core thesis is that our civilization never finished industrializing. And the social technology stack that powered the 18th up to the 20th century surge, kind of in terms of the truth-seeking science, that was birthed in the UK, where people would be completely open and transparent to understanding all aspects of technology and life. The ethic trust inspired by Protestant religion, the fact that you could go on years of expeditions and be completely disconnected from the world, but still connect and trust your business partner. The kind of the factory discipline, and the fact that people came together to defend the factory from protesters, and that was their place of work and everything. He talks about us experiencing an exhaustion of those resources and core engine of society, but not being replaced. So he kind of go against the idea that we're in a post industrial stage, or a fourth industrial revolution, and does critique something like IoT, the revolution around Internet of Things and so on. But he argues we're in a post-industrial exhaustion state. And that is sliding us into an invisible collapse that we very often don't address. So he looks at things that actually broke. He talks about how social technologies have eroded, how we went from this sort of aristocracy inspired truth telling to a science committee, right? So we need to trust the science in order to believe it. And how these kind of friendships driven by religious alignment became replaced by professionalism in the HR world. Production centralized beyond the society that created it. Knowledge became procedural, to the point where it became parasitic. White collar overproduction now absorbs the sort of the industrial class, and it hides the real downward mobility behind GDP artifacts and behind credential inflation. It talks about symptoms that we already see, right? We see supply chain fragility as a result of COVID. We see lifetime stagnation. Um, we see a substitution of goods. We see falling lifespan. We see billionaire wealth that is over 50% inherited in Europe. We see states that can no longer mobilize populations for shared production. And we see this kind of slide, this kind of decline being invisible. So another thing that he argues is the fact that elites benefit from this sort of narrative management, and shocks like war, pandemic, or natural disasters expose the gap only when this sort of replacement capacity no longer exists. He talks about the fact that East Asia still runs on factory values, but the West and most of Europe have frozen their industrial revolutions into social democratic museums, essentially, and that we are going through a crisis that is not economic, but it is social technical. So we lack the social inventions, the new forms of trust, loyalty, and coordination in production to reindustrialize and leap to a genuine novel civilization core engine. And without them, technology itself will probably rot and not help us advance.
Yeah, I think you summed up the thesis quite well. I'm gonna restate it too, so that everybody in the room also gets a full grasp of what the author is saying, which I think is really important for us to discuss. And then I'm going to get into a bit of sort of a critique of the article that I have from maybe our perspective, from a network perspective. So yes, Roxanne is 100% right. He's saying that our civilizations rest on core social technologies, not material technology, but coordinating protocols, knowledge protocols, and connectionism that makes these institutions function, right? So the Industrial Revolution is what really set up the current institutional structure that we have right now, but it was never quote unquote completed. It was exhausted, right? The pre-industrial social capital. This is what Roxana mentioned: the Protestant trust networks, the aristocratic truth-telling networks that existed. These are what made industrialization possible. This was like the social coordination firmament. But what's happened over time, and it's eroded through these like invisible bureaucratic failures that exist in these institutions, right? So ultimately, the article is really about institutional failure, and that it's not a failure that is outwardly visible, but largely it's based on the loss of knowledge, the loss of proper successionism. This is something he talks about in another article, by the way. A lot of times these institutions they'll lose some owner or some founder or some key manager, and then when they leave, the knowledge that they had about how the organization actually functions is lost in the chain of succession, you see. And what that ultimately means is that you get people who are really good, who are part of what's been called the managerial class. They're really good at the levers and the pulleys functionality of those organizations, right? But they don't understand how it actually operates. They don't really have a holistic view of its organizational capacity. So that's been lost in translation over time, right? So this is what we call, what's happening now is what we refer to as the post-industrial society. But this is not an upgrade. This is just our descriptive terminology of a failed society, is really the aftermath, right, of civilizational failure. And this is where I get to a little bit of a critique that I have. So there's nothing optimistic in his article, right? There's no positive outlook. In my opinion, it's largely a black pill. It's a great article. It's a great analysis, but it doesn't really speak to where we're going, other than things are failing without really a solution offered. And Roxanne, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I didn't really see, it was just an analysis in my opinion. I don't think he was purposely trying to be black pilled. I just don't think the purpose of that article was to provide a solution.
Yeah, it was an analysis, right? And a bit of a historical overview of where society was ahead of the Industrial Revolution that happened in the 18th century and lasted for about 2 more centuries, and then it looked into what is happening today and this kind of erosion that always comes up, but it doesn't offer solutions, which I think makes it very interesting because not having a solution provided, but just having a bit better understanding of the actual problem can help you derive solutions, right? It's literally just research material for people to understand where did we go wrong and how did we end up here. And a lot of people are asking themselves, how did we go from, having this sort of 100 years of building and advancing so much that nature can't keep up with it, because we've evolved in 100 years, we've advanced civilization more than in 1,000 years, to how did we end up being in a position where the managers are not leaders themselves. There's no consensus over what is honest and dishonest behavior. There are no values. There's no loyalty. There's no way to trust the people that we work with. So we rely on the sort of centralized systems that are failing and collapsing, and bureaucracies to handle this kind of social interaction, social technologies that he refers to.
Yeah, well said. I want to point out to another article that he wrote, and that I'm not sure if you had a chance to get at it as well, Roxana, but it's got some of the similar material in it. It is called, where'd I put it? I think it's just Why Civilizations Collapse. Anyway, it's linked in the article, and I'll find it and I'll put it in the Megatron above. But he does basically make the case that it's all related to this institutional decline. But I thought one of the best insights was just how this, and you mentioned it, Roxana, and I think it's really important for us to understand because of what we're building, and we'll get into that. But invisibly, right, these institutions enter these stages of decline. But it should be obvious to us that when an institution is failing, they don't come out and just say, "Oh yeah, we're failing," and they're not transparent about that. But this is really a process that is potentially gradual. Kind of the cliche, I think Berha even mentions one of his article. These institutions collapse gradually and then suddenly, right? It seems like it happened in the moment, but over time, through knowledge loss, through loss of skills, through overburdened bureaucracy that tends to entrench these institutions, over time this takes its toll, and then the institution seems to have failed overall. There's something kind of funny he mentions in the second article. He says that even if you look at history, that the like, for instance, the Roman Empire and the Mayan Empire didn't really document their collapse. And then I did a little bit of looking into that claim, and that's not entirely true. I think, sadly, as humans, what we're really good at doing is documenting our failures and our collapse. Of course, the Romans, they articulated this differently as their civilization was crumbling around them, right? They usually talked about it in the context of moral decline rather than structural decline or institutional collapse. They just saw the people within their circle losing the key principles and values that the Roman cultural ethic usually upheld, right? So becoming more debauched, less prone to civic order, and practicing different types of discipline, which was very characteristic of the Roman state apparatus. All that started to fall to the wayside. Of course, then Christianity, after Constantine became popular, which discarded the pagan traditions. So there was these institutional changes, these bureaucratic collapses. It's kind of funny. They actually mentioned that after, and we won't go through the full history lesson here, but after the Romans defeated, the Roman Republic defeated Carthage, and of course the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic transitioned into an empire, they lost a common enemy that they could be focused on, right? Which also exacerbated some of what they called moral decline or moral decay, because everyone started to focus on their own gains or riches rather than the fear of being destroyed, which I thought was interesting. Anyway, Burha does mention that in the second article. I'm going to find it and I'll publish it here at the top. But let's get into a bit of our kind of focus, and we can discuss this if you guys want it. So what he's ultimately getting at, or what he hints at in the article, is that what needs to the solution is that we need better social coordination, social truth telling, better community efforts. It's not just going to be in the technology, right? Just because we have more and more advanced technologies doesn't mean we're going to solve these problems that have been entrenched in our institutions since time immemorial. Effectively, what has to happen is we have to sort of change our social technology, or our social layer. And that's what I see that we're working on, right? Within the parallel society blockchain community network, we're experimenting. And here's the key word: we're experimenting with governance models, novel governance models and implementations that allow us to test new types of ways that we can engineer social trust, new types of ways that we can organize different types of rule sets, and different ways we can create anti-fragility, or embed anti-fragility in our networks, which bureaucratic systems and highly monocultural and centralized institutions can't really offer. So I think this is a really valuable lesson. In his article offers a really valuable lesson, like Roxana mentioned, in terms of why these institutions fail as an analysis, and what we can change, and how we can change by offering up new social coordination mechanisms as well. So I'm going to let Roxana respond if you have any additional thoughts, and then maybe we can reset the room. We have Mariana, who's come up here to speak. Maybe she wants to mention something in relation to this, or maybe we want to go back and we can talk about circles too. We can kind of mix and match as we usually do in these spaces. It's so fun, guys, so fun.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of, you hear this a lot. You hear people say, "Oh, we've exhausted um, the opportunity to invent new things, or the opportunity to create new things." But I think that's quite a limiting statement to put out there, because I do believe that the human um, uh, the, the idea of being human is highly complex, right? We are complex beings, whether taken individually or in a group context, in a community, society, neighborhood, etc. So I think the next advancements in terms of innovation and invention and creation will be around this sort of um, society, um, um, uh, societal technology layers, right? Which can mean, well, if we've lost the ethics that we had during um, people believing in God, what will be the next iteration to bring people together? What will unite people if it's not God? So in some ways today, sports unites people, right? Um, you have stadiums that are the new religion. You have jujitsu that is bringing people together, that are quite professionally profound and technical, and it's becoming a standard um, of brotherhood, right? So I think we have a lot to experiment with, and we have a lot of opportunities. Um, and with logos, we've just really started, right? We started a bit over 8 months ago, trying to understand our these kind of localized communities that we're present in, and trying to understand better um, our relation to our essentially the relations between each other. um, what can bring us together, what resonates, the messaging that people respond to, the ideas that make people curious and um, make people feel like, okay, I want to take part in this even without being remunerated for my time. um, so I think it's quite an interesting time for us to experiment and see how far it can go, and sort of create formulas that would allow people to organize themselves locally, also be part of a global human network, um, and advance their localized and advance the network level, the global level of whatever that will look like, whether it is campaigning, whether it is sharing insights, whether that's international trade, whether that's peer-to-peer agency. We don't know what it will look like, right? Because we don't, we're going into this half blind, but hopeful that people are curious and people will become curious to want to be part of it.
Yeah, Roxana, extremely well said. One of the things we're trying to do, and I think this is key, at not only at Logos. When I say we, I definitely mean Logos. I also mean the greater community of people working in any of these regenerative spaces. What we're really trying to do is revive an aspect of our culture that has eroded and decayed over time. And what that aspect is, and Jared and Peter talk about this at some length in Farewell to Westphalia, but a lot of the middleware of society, the organizations, the clubs, the fraternities, the things that brought community to community, right? The things that brought community to the neighborhood and all aspects of society have become less and less important. And I think the relationship to the article that Roxana brings to bear is that with these loss of a knowledge economy, with the loss of understanding institutions, and with more focus on top-down centralized processes, it now seems inevitable, right? It seems inevitable that there would be a level of loss for certain organizations that don't seem relevant in like an industrialized type of community that is more interested in making cogs, right, out of people. This is also mentioned, by the way, in the article, and this is something that we've talked about in the past, but mass schooling, or the schooling, like the Prussian education model is mentioned. It's the idea that it emerged to proceduralize the cultural shock of industrial life, right? About churning out worker drones, people who are ripe and ready for military service and action. So it's like professionalism and committee science replaced the aristocratic truth-telling and Protestant friendship as well, right? So well, there are these different layers of connectionism in society that have been lost, and we really want to try to revive that, obviously and preferably without like and a quote unquote aristocratic truth-telling component, but more of a community-led effort to bring connections to bear that that have either dwindled or cease to exist over time. And that's what these spaces are about too. These very spaces that we're having here, the ones that we have in physical context, it's about sharing community ideas and also getting together and solving a problem, what we're calling a winnable issue, right? So this is part of that solution space that Berger does not get into in his article. Maybe in other articles he does get into his version of a solution, but that's what ours is to this process, I think. So let me take just a moment here to reset the room. I really personally love this discussion. We have about 23 people in the room. Make sure you guys are sharing and retweeting if you indeed find this conversation valuable. I think it's extremely valuable. Also, we've been talking about logo circles. Generally speaking, we're always trying to provide updates. We do have Mariana here now, so I want to give her space to provide her update, and then we'll jump back into the article in this discussion point as well.
Thank you, Sterling. Yes, I want to invite everyone to the Mexico City Circle, Friday 23rd. At this, it is in Luma. It is published in Luma, Logos Luma calendar. So I encourage and to invite all your friends, family in Mexico to join. And well, that's the update regarding the circle meetup. And I would like to make a comment on the discussion. And I want to bring a little bit from last week's conversation on education, where we were analyzing or talking about just having one skill and one expertise compared to having multiple skills and be more versatile or have more alternatives, and how this links to today's conversation and logos circles. And my comment is that, well, we are certainly in this, we are looking to the chasm, no, with all this awareness of institutions currently failing to fulfill and to provide provide social capital or cohesion among human beings. But now we have these technologies, no, blockchain technologies, and we have all these alternatives like decentralized organizations and circles, like logo circles. And what I want to say is that we have, where we are like building, we are like putting together all the pieces of the same puzzle, and these circles will also contribute to highlight different ways to reinvent our social interactions, but also capitalism. For instance, I wrote an article that is going to be released in the Logos Press engine, where I approach governance and blockchain through the lens of Elinor Ostrom's polycentric governance theory. And what I learned from this article is that, well, we are very used to our hierarchical systems where the power relations amongst humans are, and our roles are tied to the position that we occupy in this hierarchical system, right? Like, I am an economist, and then I work in the economic field, and then I work for one company, and that's like my one position, and my power relation is defined in that way. But when we combine, when I combine this Elinor Ostrom's findings in and blockchain dynamics, what I found, what I learned is that in blockchain-based governance, and our circles are part of this blockchain-based governance alternatives, the power relations are in the actor himself. And we establish our power relations in a very fluid and dynamic way. So what does that mean? That means that I can have multiple skills and roles, and I decide, for example, I can be a node validating transactions, and at the same time, sometimes simultaneously, vote in a decentralized organization, or contribute to an indexing protocol, or become a juror in a decentralized court. So these roles can be used, assumed, and abandoned at will. So in that way, our governance and our social system can also turn modular, composable, and dynamic. And just to enclose, in my article, I also found that, okay, cool, this is a great, okay, we're in this failing time, or not failings, but civilization crisis, but we have also the chance and the unique opportunity to reinvent. For example, I read a lot of articles about the problems in labor that artificial intelligence and automation through blockchain will provoke by substituting humans. But at the same time, okay, that's one way of looking at that. But the other way to look at it is that we can have multiple new ways of making money for a living in these new arrangements, and that's also like a solution for these labor concerns, no? Because labor markets, for example, can become plural, flexible, and directed, no? And so instead of fearing labor displacement and mass job obsolescence, we have an emerging landscape where we can reimagine also the labor markets instead of, well, just instead of thinking only on their decline, right? So yeah, it's I want to end here because I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but that's what I think about this discussion.
No, Mariana, I think, okay, so we have the little blue ribbon Toastmasters Award for mic drop speech. I think we're going to go ahead and deliver that Toastmasters Award to you today for really thank you for that valuable insight there. My goodness. This is why we have these spaces, so we can grow our gray matter every single time, right? Okay. Cool. Thanks, Mariana, for that. We're going to continue on that in this realm of the discussion also, and we'll contemplate this. But now we also have Amelia on the stage with her update from Circles. I think she also has some special juicy news that she's going to share with us as well. So stay tuned. Amelia, welcome.
Thank you. I love to be able to share the juicy news and these little benefits for the community. So thank you to Lou for letting me do that on PS. We'll keep that till the end. Cool.
I think we lost you.
Oh no.
Well, guys, so much for the juicy news.
It dawned on me that I can use this microphone. Do I sound okay? Oh no, there's the echo. Do I sound okay?
Not really. You sound like you're in a bathtub.
Perfect. See you later.
So let's reset Amelia. She'll do a hard reset, and then we'll see if we can get her back. We have one person in a bathtub and another person on Planet Mashed Potatoes without an internet connection. But
Am I
guess
mashed
what?
potatoes?
There you see. Now you came back. See
I
how
heard
that
that.
worked? I heard that.
Dialing in from my baked potato here. I'll try again. So yeah, I wanted to shout out Mariana and all the good work she's doing in Mexico City. And Mariana is actually going to be joining us next week, fingers crossed, on Wednesday at 3 p.m. UTC. We are going to be holding our first online circle in Spanish, which we're very excited about, because after some discussions with both Mariana and the Barcelona circle lead and also the Buenos Aires circle lead, we were discussing the potential of working on a winnable issue together, supporting the community in Venezuela. I think all of us who've worked in Web3 have had the pleasure of working with Venezuelan diaspora before in this space. Venezuela was obviously one of the first countries that adopted crypto out of a real need for it. So it's a country where people are highly educated on crypto. Crypto is still highly used. And obviously what's happening in the country right now, and with whoever we're calling the government right now, it's not kind of safe for us to have an IRL circle in Venezuela. So yeah, we're going to bring everyone together on circles for a Spanish circle on Wednesdays and try to figure out what we can do remotely. And we're particularly excited and interested to bring on as many people who are part of the Venezuela diaspora living in whichever country outside of their own, who have some connections back at home, some direct connections to family or friends or businesses. So we can, kind of have that direct route into people without kind of putting anyone at risk for organizing on the ground. So that's the first piece of news that I will share. That's probably just as juicy as the other one. I'll be honest.
Nice. We want to keep the news as juicy as possible and incoming.
Yes. Indeed. Then I'll share a quick update. Girl is also here if Girl would like to come on, who's leading the circle in Porto. We are excited to have our first IRL meetup happening for the Porto Circle on Thursday at D House. Really cool kind of early movers in the space in Portugal that are going to be hosting us. So we're excited to go there and meet people for the first time who we've been kind of speaking with online a little bit as we organize around our winnable issue of building this digital escape egress for domestic violence survivors. So yeah, we're really excited. We'll report back on how that goes next week. And then for kind of this final piece, I'll ask Logos for some help here. If you can post the link that I shared in our DM and pin that, because we are excited to share with everyone on this call access to early bird tickets for Parallel Society, which is our festival we're having here in Lisbon on March 6th and 7th. These early bird tickets have got a lovely discount, but I believe it's only going to be an active discount until tomorrow, so you'll have to swipe them up fast. To remind you guys, Parallel Society, it's a 2-day event. It's a 2-day festival. So this first day, we're bringing together a number of different organizations and projects in the space. Tor is joining us, NIM, Urbe are joining us from Rome, Deca from Urbe, it's excited to be there. Zoo Grammars and Zalu, various pop-up cities, Treasure Cities Institute. And the numbers, yeah, of coalition partners just keeps growing. So that's day one, bringing everyone together, going to have a number of different workshops, educational sessions, trying to make it as participatory for everyone there as possible. So avoiding as many kind of keynotes and really trying to build something together. And then day two, we have a full-on cultural musical underground experience with some pretty impressive headline acts. I've never quite seen acts like this in a crypto adjacent event, I have to say. So Apparat's going to do a live set, Giles Peterson, Clark, Moses Boyd, Afro Jams, Nelson Makosa, and we're just closing now a second round of headliners. And also there's going to be a big announcement for a number of local acts that we've been working with. So we had an open call. And so, yeah, in the next few weeks, we'll be announcing a lot more artists. So, yeah, if someone doesn't mind pinning that link in the space above, and people can grab their discounted early bird tickets.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And guys, I can't recommend enough taking the time to at least look into the event, and it's going to be tagged here in the Megatron. I'll take a look if someone hasn't already tagged it. Really, it's just going to be an amazing lineup in terms of people who are going to be there, with allowing you to work with them, to have open demonstrations, to talk about how we can hack for public good. All these kind of things are going to be building up at once. And a lot of our friends who have been in the spaces are going to be there. We're expecting Aaron Day, who's been in the space. You guys know him, to show up, be hanging out with us. It's very likely that Xana will be there. We're still working on a few different connections, but it's of course Harry with NIM and the NIM team will be there. Just going to be an amazing group of people. A lot of people so dedicated and hardcore, focused on privacy tech, that really I can't see. There are other events working on this, but the way that we have approached it, with a more kind of open-ended and expressive and creative component, just makes it for a beautiful experience. So it's going to be highly recommended that you guys show up. Thanks so much for that, Amelia. Juicy news indeed at the top of the hour. Okay, cool. So let's I'm going to take the time to reset the room. We've been going for exactly 1 hour. We'll probably go for around another 30 minutes. This is where we're going to get even more hardcore into the discussion, unless we get any more juicy news or maybe even some gossip. Amelia. Okay, so let's you guys want to come up and have a conversation with us? We're talking about the post-industrial era. We're talking about how institutions have currently shaped up, and really talking about Roxana bringing up Samo's work. His is really an analysis of why institutions fell on a variety of different bases, primarily looking at knowledge failure, succession failures, and also the monocultures that develop as a result of in industrial tech, and then that industrial tech getting traditionalized, right, and then not changing, right? They're not being a replacement. So these institutions naturally fall into obsolescence and decay. And it's so that what that means is it's incumbent upon us who are working in these novel spaces, developing emergent technologies, creating parallel communities, invigorating blockchain communities, to find a path forward, to build the replacements, right, that usher in a new paradigm of not only technological advancement, but social advancement, social coordination, social development in ways that haven't previously existed. And that really, I think, is an inspiring message. It's not just that society is failing and that's happening in a vacuum. It's that all of these new emergent properties are coming into existence as a result, right? It's kind of like a birthing crisis, and there's a midwife birthing us into this new form of existence. And that to me is exciting, right? And this is also why we really shun the meaning crisis. We acknowledge that it's happening, right? But we realize that we don't have to wallow underneath the bed sheets and cower in fear, and we don't have to understand that the world is on the brink of imminent collapse. Yes, things are awful regarding the surveillance apparatus, but there is hope. There is a glimmer of hope for the future, and we're the ones that are here helping to develop and build that. And I think it's a beautiful time to be alive and be part of this movement. Cool. So if you guys, Roxana, maybe if you have some more thoughts on the article, or if we want to take it a different direction, and anybody else who's welcome to talk again, come up. Let's have a conversation. I know I kind of just put Roxana on the spot too. So we're welcome to take this thing wherever you guys want. I do. So personally, I really think that this like most people get that institutions are failing or collapsing, but I don't really think that a lot of folks understand the full impact of that in terms of civilization as a whole, right? Really, when I mentioned the Roman Empire, I'm a huge fan of talking about their history. By the way, just side recommendation: if you really want to try to get a grasp historically of where we're at, really study the Roman Empire, I recommend reading Mary Beard's book. She wrote a book called SPQR, right? Which is just like the government crest, right, or motto for the Roman Republic. Her book is fantastic. But the idea behind her book is she simply tells the story of what happened and how the Roman Republic went into decline, probably not in as much detail as Edward Gibbon's work on the decline of the Roman Empire. But what happens is a lot of people internally don't necessarily realize it's happening. So it's slow, and then it's sudden, and then there's an ultimate failure, right? And a breaking off of those particular communities. But one of the ways that I think we prevent that is understanding what Samo has said about knowing that we need to be able to pass down and hand down knowledge appropriately and adequately. We need to ensure that we're not just creating cogs and sort of a cultural machine that benefits the cultural elites and the aristocrats at the expense of the rest of the population. Another way that we can describe that, we've talked about in the past, that Samo doesn't articulate, is that what we're really doing is we're preventing zero-sum game dynamics from emerging in the context of these communities, which just means that we're not creating an environment where the incentives are skewed, where people in certain positions are trying to optimize for their own personal gain at the expense of the collective, at the expense of collective human flourishing and holistic betterment. So trying to solve these problems, I think it's incumbent upon us working in these parallel ecosystems. And something we haven't talked about in this space, I think really the calling card of our whole cultural ethos is this idea of exit. So being able to pinpoint systems that are largely failing and then exit those systems, move into systems or communities or ecosystems that have institutions or morals or sentiments that are more aligned with our own is really a key valuation point for what we're building, right? Because if you get stuck in a monocultural bureaucracy, then things start to fall apart and it feels like you can't really have an impact. And I think this is largely one of the driving forces or catalysts for the meaning crisis. People largely feel like their lives have lost meaning, and they're more alienated and more isolated than ever because they feel like they can't make impact on their community, right? They feel like they can't create change. And they realize, if not consciously, subconsciously, that voting in the right politician or appealing to your local corporation or whatever it is isn't actually feeding change to your local community. And so this is why we are trying to reestablish our understanding of incentives, truly speaking, with like logo circles, the community network, and this is also applicable to anyone working in the regenerative financial sector, regenerative agriculture, regenerative communities, anybody who's trying to understand that we don't need to be extractive and exploitative by design, but instead try to give back to our, not only our environment, but our communities and our people as well. It'll create better connections, not only between all of us as human beings, but also between our planet and the earth and the environment as well, which I think really plays into this. So I think that's extremely valuable. Going to fill the room for comments and thoughts. Happy to continue monologuing, but we definitely want to open up the conversation.
No, please. I will save you from the beauty of a monologue. Um, yeah, I think we really need to develop um, how to say this, civic frameworks that look at the sort of circular economy, but not necessarily a circular economy of financial aspects, but a circular economy of knowledge sharing, resource sharing. Um, there's a very interesting conversation if we ever manage to bring Vinay Gupta, his work at Materium, which has been going on for a long time. In 2019, we used to have some really deep conversations around um, kind of countries that thrive based on the fact that there is a secondary market for specific products. So he was looking at, there's let's say you have a community of professional photographers. Um, they will go through a cycle of purchasing cameras that are more proficient and more professional as they become more engulfed in photography as a profession. But then there is a demand for pre-owned cameras, right? So people that are passionate, maybe they don't want to become professional photographers, but they're passionate about it, but they wouldn't want to spend, let's say, $3,000 to get a semi-professional camera, but they would spend 1,000 and buy a pre-owned camera from another photographer. But then we also looked at countries like India, for example, that is importing clothes, large quantities of clothing go back to India. They are being essentially destroyed through a very specific process. And then they recreate fabric, which they then sell back to different countries, right? That can be um, specific fabrics and specific threading that can be used in making carpets, for example, or go back into producing jeans, or um, any of clothing item or clothing item that you can think of. And you wouldn't have these stories if there was no demand for pre-owned um, products, for pre-owned services. So it's quite interesting how you can take the stories from either India, which is one of the major producers of fabrics and um, threads, or take the story of industries like photography and apply this kind of principle into civic society and have civic frameworks where people reuse, and there's no reason why people should not reuse services, products, technologies to help improve or to help create new forms of institutions, new type of governance, and all that. So it's quite an interesting aspect that is very much circular.
Yeah, what I really like, Roxana, by the way, is the fact that because we are rolling out and deploying, and when I say we, I just generally mean the community working in parallel societies and also anything that's blockchain adjacent, particularly, is that we definitely have a mindset toward experimenting with different types of not only like community arrangements, but governance architectures. But also, I think what this means, and people haven't maybe talked about on a more fundamental level, is we're also experimenting with crafting different types of cultures. But cultures really emerge as a byproduct or a natural phenomenon of groups of people when they come together and they share a common value set, when they identify with a certain type of heritage, or maybe they find themselves in a certain kind of predicament. Really, it is that agglomeration of individuals and activities and activations that and memetics that lead to the creation of a new cultural fabric and cultural ethos. And I think that is a critical component to these communities that we're building and developing, because it's what's going to really shape the future foundation of the new society, really the new paradigm that we're trying to ultimately live in, right? Because I think everyone here clearly understands, without having to read all the Burhas, all the Toynbees, all the more critical historians. We understand the situation that we're in, and we understand the predicament, but it's really about navigating the problems and finding a solution. Talking about the problems is extremely easy, right? I mean, it's tremendously easy to articulate the problems. Now, it's not as easy to find really novel analyses like Burha did, but trying to uncover the proper solutions and understanding the direction that we're going and trying to grasp those attractors that can actually craft a better future is tremendously difficult, because it requires innovation, it requires social capital, it requires collaboration, it requires high trust and high fidelity societies that just don't currently exist in the way. So we're having to really craft that from the ground up before we can innovate toward holistic betterment, right? At least that's the way I think about it. Roxana?
Yeah, I was thinking of another example. There's there's a few projects out there with cultural resonance. So they take lost languages um, that haven't been spoken in thousands of years. With the help of technology, they can be brought back to life, so to speak. But the way they're being brought to life is you will have people that will sing a song that hasn't been sang in 5,000 years, for example, because now they have the opportunity to bring it back with the technology and with the knowledge, um, the knowledge refresh opportunities that we have today, right? So in that sense, even if something collapses, erodes, or it is deemed lost, and especially with knowledge and culture, um, the technology and the social consensus allows you to bring it back to life partially or entirely. Just in the same way as, and this is probably a highly ethical discussion, but at one point, if it's not already possible, you'll be able to um, take a DNA from species that have been gone extinct and in some way recreate that species, not maybe not 100% accurately, but to a percentage of accuracy, and it shows you, okay, this is something close to what we were supposed to have 10,000 years ago, for example. And that's only possible because there's a social consensus. There are people that are willing to do this. There are people that are willing to come together and work on projects. There is a bit of funding available, or there are people interested in funding these opportunities, and the technology is getting there where we are able to reconstruct even something that is deemed as lost.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I just the company that's actually doing that and working on it, I think they're called Colossal Biosciences, is just radically insane stuff. But I think you're right. You hinted at the idea that these species that they're bringing back to life are more like functional similarities, right? They're not actual clones or replicas. It's like tweaks to the DNA. I think of, oh, what was the last one they brought back to life? There's probably somebody in this room that's more familiar with the work that Colossus is doing. I think the dire wolf is what it was that they brought back, but they actually just changed the DNA to match it right with the wolf that gave it its like size and more furriness. So anyway, this is the kind of stuff that's actually happening, right? But there's a social coordination layer and a new kind of knowledge economy. This is what people aren't talking about as much, and a new mimetic foundation that allows these types of technological advancements and innovations to happen within the context of these networks. And now, of course, we're what we're doing with new social protocols is we're unwrapping these parallel societies, and we're structuring them in such a way that captures this knowledge and that upholds and champions those cultures that allow us to continue to innovate, right? Because what I think what this ultimately does, it's psychological. It creates an environment where people feel not only like they don't feel necessarily compelled to work, but they're so energized by that culture and by their passion and the commingling of all of these different kind of mimetic ingredients, that it creates a foundation that's ripe for this kind of acceleration in technology. Now, of course, the thing that we haven't discussed, and I think this has to do with the decline of institutions in the modern days, like what happens when you don't try to manage risk, right, with these different types of technologies. What happens when you try to accelerate for acceleration? Since, and to me, this is like a post industrial type of ethos, right? Where you're just trying to push forward as quickly as you can, right? You're trying because you're trying to appease Mr. VC, or you're trying to appease a stakeholder. And very clearly, Berger in his article, all of his articles, has a very keen sense of criticism, maybe even of distaste for that type of environment. So creating technologies for technology's sake is one thing, and I think we're all very good at doing that. But understanding that we have to have in our cultural ethos and cultural fabric, and understanding that it's possible that we could push into directions that we don't necessarily want to go in, right? It's like the whole thesis from Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park. Just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean we should. And I think this is always an important vector for discussion as we create these cultures and these communities as well, because I don't think it's just about technological acceleration. I think Vitalik also got it at least partially right with the idea of defensive accelerationism.
Yeah, I was thinking about again the idea of um, collapse of society and civilization, led by the loss of knowledge and the loss of information. And in his article, the Why Civilizations Collapse, um, Samuel talks about dysfunctional societies where the loss of knowledge becomes the rule. Um, but I think here, I think the loss of knowledge that we have today, um, that we have had for the past 50 years, and not talking about historic, like lost languages, lost cultures, but talking more specifically about knowledge that we had until 30 years ago and that all of a sudden it is lost today. A lot of it is driven by the fact that it is gated information. It is gated knowledge done by IP laws, done by company policies of not to disclose specific information. And then the thinking is you wouldn't have this in a society that functions based on open source principles, because everything is out in the open. People can always audit what has been done, fork it and provide improvements and advance it in a way, which is why I think for us, the fact that, and I think Michel Bauwens talks about this in one of his interviews with Jared, he talks about the fact that um, um, Linux becoming so popular and being widely used opened up this whole open source movement where we essentially we didn't just open source the code, we open sourced employment, we open sourced professional collaboration, right? Because people could pick up on things and further advance the domain. And there was no gated content, there was no gated information, there were no company policies. It was all out in the open. And I think that is key. Knowledge can be preserved if knowledge is communicated and is being distributed in an open source manner.
You know, one thing too, Roxanne, I'm thinking about, and this is really a cool bit of history or story to tell, that there have been some cultures that have been extremely sophisticated in their ability to transmit knowledge and information through having a keen sense of storytelling and an appetite for storytelling. It seems like there has also been an erosion of the oral tradition, right? Especially as people continue to become more reliant on technology. And I think it's the smaller community unit that has typically been so versed and adept at storytelling. What comes to mind is the Gaelic Irish, right? The Gaelic were just profound storytellers and had a really deep propensity to pass down different kinds of traditions for a long time. It's no surprise to me that the Gaelic Irish society, right, in Gaelic Ireland, and their Brehon system of laws lasted some 2,000 years, almost wholly undisturbed. And the cool thing about the Brehon societies is that it was a more libertarian type of community, right? This is key. There were more individual freedoms, although they functioned, or there were functional tribal units within those communities. But all of the laws, the literature, the poems, the mythos, the memetics, that was all transmitted down the line through an oral tradition. Of course, they did have a you know a knack for writing and telling stories through writing, but their oral tradition was just profound. And just a bit about how that, just so anybody wants some context of how that culture functioned, because it might be very relevant to people crafting new parallel societies. They had a group of private judges or arbitrators called brehons, right? And so in these communities, if a person had a problem with another individual, say they think a person wronged them, they would then go to the brehon and they would say, this person, say they stole some money from me. The brehon would then take over that case and they would ask the people to come together and they would deal with their issues through the brehon, and the brehon would arbitrate. And of course, this was a reputation system that was all, of course, largely oral, and they transmitted within the to the different tribes. And how it worked is all these tribes had to pay in a fee called a surety, right, to the brehon class. And it was a way more decentralized, tribal, loosed coalition of tribes that engaged. There was no such thing in ancient Gaelic Ireland, by the way, as a crime against the state, right? you did, if you did a wrong and somebody complained to a brehon, then it was potentially arbitratable. Now they did have their common law, or a form of polycentric law that outlined generally what these were. I've always been so fascinated by the Gaelic simply because they had a freer society that lasted so long, and not enough people talk about it or have a lot of familiarity with it. But just to speak to the power of oral traditions, I think that really is the really the fertile soil from which that whole society grew. And if you ever speak to anybody who has an Irish bone in their body, you always can see how great of a speaker they are, and usually how good of a storyteller. Terence McKenna was had a very deep Irish background, right? Anyway, thought I'd share that tidbit. Go ahead, Roxana, if you had something else. And then I think Fabiana had come to the stage, but maybe dropped. I don't know. This thing glitches all the time.
It's hard to do knowledge sharing on this stage, isn't it? Yeah, I think it just got me thinking with what you said about the Irish. They do have um, the songs and the traditions. I went to a wedding that followed a very specific ancient ritual, which was it was quite fascinating to see a couple of years ago. So I think maybe so we reset the room, or we just put it out there for people to discuss it. But I think the ability to build things in an open source manner, which means that at any given time, this knowledge is never lost and it can always be picked up. And I think people get very creative, and technology allows us to understand um, things from a different perspective, and maybe reconstruct some of that knowledge graph. And the other one is we don't just have the knowledge, but we also have the rituals, the traditions, the cultural aspects, and the communication layer, which is very important. And this allows people to exist and thrive and govern themselves and organize themselves in quite unique ways, like you mentioned.
Yep, what 100%. I really love how we're all definitely involved and have to continue to be involved in the knowledge sharing aspect of the development of these cultural, so the cultural conditions can create the necessary and sufficient conditions for the development of the technologies we want to build, while staying safe, while also mitigating the meaning crisis that John Vervaeke has talked about at length in his work, which we've also discussed at length here as well. Fabiana, were you ever able to come up? I approved the speaker request, I think the second time, but again, it's glitchy. Sometimes people are up here as a speaker and I can't see them. Sometimes it doesn't approve them, but I think I'll give Fabiana another chance and see, maybe you can come up if okay. All right, I'm approving again. Let's see. And then I'll have Fabiana add whatever Fabiana wants to add, and then we'll start closing down the space. So this has been really fun conversation, by the way. Roxanne, a good, fantastic topic, actually.
I was not on Wi-Fi actually, and sorry, I was out of reach of Wi-Fi for silence, and then dropped off. But I just want to say I want to see Lambda magazine, our own avant-garde magazine, where we write the cutting edge, because we read it like AO magazine or whatever they're called, Paragon, Paradox. Like, we are the cutting edge, so we should have our own magazine where we write what's on the ground, and then we can, those of us who are not gifted with the speech, we can take our time and write and put references and write some articles, and I think that would be fun. So that will be it for me.
That was something that we were talking about with Chris, who recently joined us on the movement side. The idea that right now we have these small logos, zines that cover either the ethos of open source and interesting stories from the open source culture, or practical guides or practical things. But the highlight will be once we can create these stories from our grassroots movement and highlight actual stories from the ground, highlight actual things that we've achieved, lessons, informed opinions, right? So we're not just debating because we think so, but we have the data to back up any of the claims that we put out there. That will be very, very interesting. And I think by the end of the year, we should be able to produce this kind of magazines.
Indeed. Yeah. I hope by the end of the year, having that would be fantastic. Very good. All right, friends. Well, in the interest of time here, I'm going to close us up. First of all, I want to appreciate so much all the speakers who came up to speak today and engage in this conversation. Roxana for bringing the topic and speaking. Mariana for coming up and also adding to the conversation and winning the esteemed Toastmasters Blue Ribbon Prize of the day. Thank you for that. Amelia for bringing the juicy news. And by the way, the link to get the tickets for Parallel Society, did we get that in the Megatron? I don't even know what's in the Megatron anymore.
It's in the Megatron.
Sweet, the Megatron, the Supertron. Thank you. Cool. Thanks, Fabiana, for coming up to speak. Anyone else who came up and spoke, thank you so much. Thanks for really want to appreciate all the OGs who came and spent the majority of their time in this space with us today. I know the attention economy can be really, really challenging sometimes, especially as all of us go out there hunting down our dopaminergic hits. So thank you, D. Clench, RGM, On Site, Matthew, Godfrey. We have Odd Name down there, Lalo, OPDE. OGs of the space, made it through the entirety of the conversation. I say made it through like it was a trudge. Man, this was so fun. Again, you guys are welcome all the time, anytime to come up and add to the conversation. We really welcome it. We know that we're chatting about material and information sometimes that is can be more complex, but we're happy to field all kinds of different views on different subjects. And we're also happy to go in different directions if we have to. But nonetheless, what we're always attempting and trying to do is continue to develop logo circles, continue working on developing the community for creating this decentralized technology stack that is privacy preserving, that is anti-fragile, and that is totally and wholly decentralized. So if any of you guys who are new to this space want to engage with us, please reach out to any one of us who are up here, and we're more than happy to put you into contact with the right people to continue developing the network. For this Thursday, we're actually going to have a regular community member on the Thursday guest space. It's going to be Simon Brown. It's going to be a great discussion. We're still going through exactly what we're going to discuss, but it's likely going to impinge on the topic of parallel societies. So make sure you check that out. Again, thanks, guys. We appreciate your time. Appreciate you being part of this network. Let's continue moving it forward. We're going to work to create a whole new paradigm. We're going to give birth to this paradigm, which is going to give birth to a new world, which is going to change the underlying structural dynamics that create holistic betterment, human flourishing, and a regenerative world so that we can all flourish well into the future. Thank you so much. Let's continue doing this. Until next time, Sterling.